Last session, we stopped at chapter 10, verses 13 through 15. So we'll pick up there and to kind of refresh where we're at. I want to hit a couple of verses and try to put them together because I think there's a point here that we were starting to get to last time that we didn't complete. And I think it's a valuable point for us to apply to our lives on a daily basis. But so let's start with rehash chapter 10, verse 2. In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. He says he's mourning, he's fasting, he's praying, he's devoting his attention to God to try to struggle through the meaning and understanding of all the things that he's been told. And then we skip down to verse 12. Then he said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and on humbling yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. So Daniel has been praying for 3 weeks. The messenger that comes to him says, hey, you were heard the day you started praying, you were heard, and I was sent. And here I am. Verse 13, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. So my point is that Daniel started praying. He prayed for 21 days, fasting and praying. And then an angel appears and tells him, hey, God heard you. The day you started praying, God heard you. And he sent me. I got delayed. It wasn't God that was delayed. It was me. His answer, his response to your prayer was delayed 21 days, but he actually answered it 21 days ago. The point I'm trying to make is Daniel didn't waver. He didn't give up. He didn't say, okay, God, you're ignoring me. He didn't say, I don't believe you anymore because you haven't responded to me. He didn't lose his faith. He didn't turn to another God or to another idol looking for somebody else to solve his problems. He committed himself to God. He patiently prayed and fasted and waited for God's answer. And we have a tendency sometimes, I think, to do that ourselves. I prayed for a week, God. You haven't answered. What's the deal? You're supposed to hear me. In the military, authority is delegated in the military. It doesn't work this way in the civilian world, I understand, but in the military, whenever you appoint someone as a commander or you appoint somebody in charge, a sergeant, whatever, you give authority. You don't change that authority. You don't pull it back, and you don't change what they do. In other words, if you appoint a sergeant to a detail, okay, you've got authority, go do it. If you don't like the way he does it, you don't get to change what he does. Your only choice is to remove him and replace him. You can't follow him around and say, okay, I gave you the authority, but now I don't like what you're doing here. You need to do it this way. You need to change that. That's not authority. You haven't delegated authority if you do that. So God, believe it or not, delegated authority to the devil, to Satan. And in Luke 4:6, it says, and the devil said to him, he's talking to Jesus, I will give you all this domain and its glory, for it has been handed to me. And I give it to whomever I wish. So the devil has been granted authority on earth by God. And I would assume that God's the same way. He's not going to say, oh, well, I messed up. I need to take that authority back. Or I need to tell you what to do with that authority. He gave the devil authority. The devil decided to interfere with this messenger and held him up for 21 days. Why? We don't know. the rules that angels have to follow, how they, what kind of fights they conduct. It's all a mystery to us. We don't know, but we do know based on this that there are battles going on all the time between evil and good that we're not aware of. Spiritual battles by spiritual beings.
It's raging.
Hmm?
It's raging. All around us, it's raging.
Yeah,
Yes.
I believe
The
that.
spirit world is more real than what we're saying. in my opinion.
Absolutely.
We don't know what relative powers they have, the demons, Satan's demons and God's angels. I mean, we know that God's more powerful. We know that God could remove the devil whenever he wants to, and he's going to. But as long as he's given the devil the authority, then the devil has the ability to utilize his authority. What we do know is that God loves us. Those of us who know God, he loves us. He hears us. He answers us. Those are all facts in my head. There's no challenges to that. That's just the truth. Now, his response to us isn't always what we desire, but it's always what's good for us, whether we understand it or not at that point in time. And I think these verses tell us that. God heard Daniel praying. He sent the answer. The answer got delayed, but Daniel was faithful in waiting until God's answer got to him. And I think we can all apply that to our lives and be better for it. Okay.
Would you say that his authority is limited? And the thing that popped in my mind was we come talking about Job and all the things he's been doing.
I thought of
You can
Job.
do everything, but you can't do this.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so the angel has come to deliver God's response to Daniel. So we pick up on verse 16. And behold, one who resembled a human being was touching my lips, and then I opened my mouth and spoke and said to him who was standing before me, "Oh, my Lord, as a result of the vision, anguish has come upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord? As for me, there remains just now no strength in me, nor has any breath been left in me." Daniel's pretty worn out. He's been fasting for 3 weeks. Clint talked about fasting Wednesday night. At one point, I thought he was saying we needed to fast for 6 days. That sounded a lot to me. He wasn't. That's not what he was saying. But think of fasting for 21 days. And so it says Daniel's worn out. I mean, he's weak from lack of food, from rest, from emotions. No, he's not. He's older than me, which means he's suffering a lot of physical disability.
Oh, dear.
I think it's important to recognize here that the word Lord is not capitalized. He's not calling him the Lord. He's calling him a Lord, a person he's respectful to, but not that he's worshiping, because he's already been told that before. So anyway, his messenger has mercy on him in verse starting at 18. Then this one with human appearance touched me again and strengthened me. He said, "O men of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Take courage and be courageous." Now, as soon as he spoke to me, I received strength and said, "May my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." Then he said, "Do you understand why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come." So again, we're back into this. He's given Daniel this information on these battles that are going on. He's fighting these princes of evil, and there's a complete disagreement in from what I've read or what I could find, nobody really knows why. Why all of a sudden is this spiritual battle being uh, shown or told to Daniel, and it really is not germane to what the message that the angel is delivering has nothing to do with these princes or battles, and it doesn't. And Daniel doesn't really give any description for it. So why is it there? Why is he telling us about it? I don't know. Other than there's no real agreement by anybody as to why it is in there, but it makes us aware of it. We know now that there's battles going on. And there's this war, and every war you have collateral damage. I mean, we go to great extremes nowadays to try to eliminate or avoid collateral damage, but you still get it. If there's a war, people are going to get hurt, and innocent people, not just the combatants, but people who happen to be in the way. We call it collateral damage. And in the spiritual war that's going on, you don't get a choice of trying to be an innocent bystander. Oh no, I don't want to get involved. You're going to be collateral damage. If you're not involved in the war and on the right side, which is God's side, then you're going to find yourself as collateral damage in this spiritual battle. You can't avoid it or evade it. It's going to happen. So you only got a couple of choices: become involved and get on the God's side of the armies, or suffer the consequences.
Roy, do you think one of the, I guess, Taliban's strategies is they think they're fixing to get attacked, they put they bring all the school children or innocent people in there to thinking, you know, if they do attack, because a lot of these people are going to, that's good publicity for us and bad for them. I mean, that's a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do you think that Satan tries to do that too
Oh, yeah.
in this spiritual battle, that there's a lot of people he brings in? So that, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can see it everyone's world. I think people, humans, all of us have the basic unholy parts of our, if we don't know God, then we're selfish. We're self-centered. We have our own particular physical desires that we want to participate in, whether they're good or bad. But true evil, to me, I mean, somebody who, just name your specific thing that you hate. But, I think true evil has to be encouraged from Satan, from some active principalities that go beyond what man's just your own common evil.
So it's like it's man's sinful nature plus Satan's influence and power.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. And I think we can see that in the world. You look at some things and you just think, how could anybody do that? How could anybody? There was a Baptist preacher in Oklahoma week before last that was arrested for sexually abusing children for a 16-year period. For 16 years, he's been abusing children in a Baptist church, not a free will Baptist church. But so when I hear things like that, I mean, that to me, that it goes beyond just our normal selfishness or our normal self-centeredness. So I think there's powers, and we're told that in several places, that we're not just fighting against flesh and blood, we're fighting against powers and principalities. So if you think about it, at the world at this time, at Daniel's age, how many people are worshiping God? How many people are like Daniel, praying every day and worshiping God and praying to him? The Israelites weren't. They weren't even recognizing that's why they're being punished. And there were no Christians yet. So the number of people praising and worshiping God at that time in the world was very few, very few. So my point is that we have Christians today. We're in a better place, even though we see it as a bad place. We're in a lot better. I mean, there are voices praising God and worshiping God every day all over this world, millions of them. Versus at this time, we're almost none. Daniel and a few friends. So is the evil still going on in the world today? It is. Do the prayers from the saints help? I think they do.
Yes.
I think it's important for us to all pray, not just for our own reasons or our own people, but for the whole world. And Gabriel and Michael are still fighting. The war wasn't settled. It wasn't resolved. Even when Jesus came and left, the war's still going on. So those angels are still deployed, still fighting, still going on. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is
Did we read 21?
oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
No, okay. 21. Here we go. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth, yet there is no one who stands firmly against me, against these forces, except Michael, your prince, with me.
That was,
Okay, so
you just spoke of.
so I made my comment on it
Yes, you
and didn't read it. So sorry about that. Okay, then we get to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is interesting in that it moves out of the apocalyptic type language into it's a vision and a description of a vision, but it's pretty straightforward. And it's so straightforward that there's very little controversy about the demonstration of what's being told to us in chapter 11 being true. Even those people who don't believe Daniel existed or that don't believe that Daniel wrote, the book of Daniel was written before these events occurred. Because regardless of how you believe, everybody agrees that what is written follows almost perfectly what actually happened in history. And in fact, to the point where there's some scholars, few of them liberal, but mostly secular scholars, experts, who say use this proof. It couldn't possibly have been written when Daniel was alive or at the end of his life. He couldn't possibly have written it because it predicts history beforehand so accurately that couldn't be done. It's just impossible. Nobody could have gotten it that right for that long and ahead of time. So therefore, it had to have been written after all that stuff had happened as a history book rather than as a prediction, prophecy book. So there is controversy as to whether it was written and Daniel's at the end of Daniel's life, or whether it was written 400 years, 500 years later, after all the history had actually occurred. That's the controversy, not the fact that it lines up with history. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So most serious Christian scholars believe that it was written at the end of Daniel's life when he was in his 80s or 90s.
So amazing that he lived to that age.
Hmm?
It's amazing that he lived at that long. That is amazing.
Yeah, well, it's amazing to meet anybody that lives that long.
But in that day and time, wouldn't that have been much longer than, I mean, the life expectancy should have been way shorter then.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, of course, in the Old Testament, we're told, you have 70 years alive.
Probably.
And
Probably.
if you're strong,
Probability. Mhm.
if you're strong, you could have 80 years alive. But you get up to 90, then you're pushing the limits.
I think
He
this,
also wasn't working the farm. He wasn't sailing the sea. He wasn't doing all of it.
I think of it this way, God numbers our day. We
All
don't.
names- All names have this thrown in there.
The how old was he? Daniel, the one that he lived?
He's pushing 90.
Yeah, close to 90.
Okay.
Yeah, at this time,
Yeah.
he's
He's
pretty,
been through a lot.
he's pretty aged. And he's fasting for, 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah,
So he's got, but he complains about not being strong, not having much strength. Okay, so there's 45 verses in this chapter, and we believe, the predominant Christian scholars believe that all 45 of these verses happened happened before Daniel. He wrote them before he died. And that, and then they occurred, some of them hundreds of years later. And
Prophetic information.
there's 135 historically accurately fulfilled prophecies in this chapter alone, which is pretty impressive. And the takeaways from Daniel, when we get to the end of it, I think that's Daniel is offered up as proof that God is in charge of everything all the time, whether the kings that come and go, the countries that come and go, God ordains them, God determines them, and God knows what's going to happen before it happens. That's the primary proof of the book of Daniel. And then the other impressive stories of faith, from the three in the fire to the lion, and so on and so forth. But so we'll get into the first verse. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. In the Septuagint, it says Cyrus the king instead of Darius the Mede. Of course, we know that they both reigned at the same time. They were co-kings. So why it's interpreted Darius the Mede in our books, I don't know, but that's pretty widely agreed upon. Okay, and this is the first year of Darius the Mede, so it's 2 years earlier than chapter 10, which was the third year. But this is not moving us back in time. What he's saying is, back then, 2 years ago, I rose as an encouragement and protection for Darius. In other words, he's getting ready to say some bad things, which means you're going to get replaced by another king. Well, that's not really good to say to a king's face. Hey, you're gonna be out here, and somebody else is going to take over your role. So he's saying, hey, before I get started, I stood up for you. I stood up for you and helped protect you when you became the king. So now when I say these things, keep in mind that I'm on your side, not their side. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. And then, so from verse 2 to 35 covers wars in Syria and Egypt from 400 BC to 200 BC. But Daniel wrote them in 550 or 560 BC. So we're talking hundreds of years. He's predicting hundreds of years. And I was thinking when I was reflecting on this, what would that be like? How could we put it in, it would be like Christopher Columbus coming to America without all the controversy, coming to America and then deciding he's going to write a book about who the first 10 presidents are going to be of the United States whenever they get around to becoming the United States. And then giving the description of each of the presidents and how long they were going to be president. And, it's just, we don't even comprehend how the significance of being able to predict hundreds of years ahead of time what's going to happen. in a way that everybody recognizes, yeah, that's exactly what he said. So we'll get to verse 2. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. Well, here we're talking about his 3 kings will arise, the son of Cyrus, Sado, Smerdis, and then Darius, or through the years 529 to 487. So those 3 kings came and went, and then the 4th king, who was obviously the most powerful, Xerxes. Yeah. And he was there for 20 some years. In the book of Esther, he's called Ahasuerus, which I guess is just another interpretation of his name. But these things are widely confirmed in secular history outside of the Bible. So it's not, like I said, it's not a controversy by anybody who these things, the guys were. But okay, so in verse 3, and a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has risen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out towards the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, not according to his authority, which he wielded, but for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others beside them. Well, that's obviously Alexander the Great. And his empire after his death was seized by 4 prominent generals who basically became combatants against each other, taking parts of his empire and then fighting between themselves for many more years. Well, I guess it's 16 minutes after, so I guess we better stop there. We want to get to the Christmas program. So just a minute, we're getting close to the end of this. A couple more weeks, we should be done with Daniel. So we're going to be thinking about moving on. And, you know, I've been doing this for a while. So if anybody, you know, after we get through with Daniel, if somebody else wants to lead the class for a while, or somebody else knows somebody else that wants to do it for a while, I don't own this. This isn't my class. This is God's class. So I'm willing and happy to continue on. But if somebody else wants to try to do it for a while, that'd be fine with me too.
You did a great job.
Well,
You did a great job.
Absolutely.
I just try to
I
read
think
God's
you bring a
word.
lot of people in this class too. Or you just, because of the things you do and things you bring into this class is another thing, is why a lot of people do come in to this class, honestly. You know, I'm not just saying that she can't do it or you can't do it, or just.
Well, it takes a lot of work and
yeah.
dedication to be able to unfold the history and plan of God.
Well-
from the Scriptures, it's very difficult to
Yeah.
understand.
A lot of it's
Many of
time
us.
consuming for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that don't have that time consuming to do it.
And you're just
Well-
smart.
I
No,
would
we're
argue
second
that, but
No, I really
anyway.
love coming to class.
Larry, we're gonna sign off.
Okay, y'all take care.
I enjoy
Love
it.
you guys.